Hi, this is Krista. Thanks for practicing with me today. This is a compilation of 8 short videos I did on how to integrate pool noodles into your land yoga practice. Pool noodles are a great yoga prop because they're cheap, easily accessible, light, and easy for us as teachers to haul around or for you as a student to store at home. These videos take you through 8 different ways you can incorporate them into your practice, whether you're standing, seated in a chair, or on a mat on the ground. A few of the videos do require that the noodles be trimmed, which can be easily accomplished with either a bread knife or a handsaw. Enjoy. I'd love to get some feedback on how they work out for you. Thanks for practicing with me today. Namaste. Hi, I'm Krista Fairbrother of Be Content Yoga. Thanks for joining me on my series on using pool noodles for land yoga. One of the main reasons people often come to yoga is to have better posture. They might live here, they know something's going on, that they need some help getting better posture, and pool noodles can actually help with that. If you put it on the ground, put the bridge of your toes on the noodle, that gets you to that place you might have heard a teacher say, bringing your thigh bones back, helps you lift your torso up off your legs, and you can use a chair if you feel like you're out of balance here. Please subscribe to all my social media channels to get all these tips on using pool noodles for land yoga. Thanks for practicing with me today. Namaste. Hi, I'm Krista Fairbrother of Be Content Yoga. Thanks for joining me on my series on how to use pool noodles in your land yoga practice. If you practice down dog, your heels may not get down to the ground and you might feel a little unstable, and you might want to use a yoga wedge if that's the case. However, yoga wedges can cost about $25, and or you don't have access to one, or you're a yoga teacher who can't afford a whole classroom's worth of these. So if you take a pool noodle and slice it into quarters, it costs you $1 at the dollar store, and now you have 4 wedges you can use in your down dog practice to help you give a little space and support in your heels. Be sure and subscribe to my social media channels to get the full series of how to use pool noodles in your land yoga practice. Thanks so much for practicing with me today. Namaste. Hi, I'm Krista Fairbrother of Be Content Yoga. Thanks for joining me on my series on how to use pool noodles in your land yoga classes. You might be a participant in chair yoga or teach chair yoga classes and deal with osteopenia or osteoporosis. So when you're trying to get some hip rotation and you have osteopenia or osteoporosis, you don't want to be doing this with a lot of rounding in your thoracic area, which you might do or you might see in your classes. If you use a pool noodle instead, because it's in your face and it's helping you get a little lift in your chest, you come back to this full hip rotation with an upright spine. So you're reducing that thoracic bending. Be sure you follow my social media channels to get my full series on how to use pool noodles in your land yoga practice. Thanks for practicing with me today. Namaste. Hi, I'm Krista of Be Content Yoga. Thanks for joining me on my series on how to use pool noodles in your land yoga practice. So if you have used a belt for shoulder openers, you can use a pool noodle for the same thing. You can choke up on it and just take it to that spot where it feels good and kind of hold it. You can hold it on the ends and take it behind you like you would a belt. Or if you'd prefer to have your elbows bent, you just take it back to that place again where it feels good. Be sure and subscribe to all my social media channels so you can get the full series on how to use pool noodles in your land yoga practice. Thanks so much for joining me today. Namaste. Hi, I'm Krista of Be Content Yoga. Thanks for joining me on my series on how to use pool noodles in your land yoga practice. Shoulder retraction is something we all need in this age of tech neck, so that can be great to practice with yoga blocks. However, they're heavy and a whole class worth of these is bulky and expensive for yoga teachers. So instead, for $1 at the dollar store, you can get 4 or 5 of these yoga blocks out of a pool noodle. They're super light. We can use them to practice that shoulder retraction, as well as, since I'm doing custom cutting, if I'm working with people who live in larger bodies or have a history of rotator cuff injuries, I can make them bigger, so it's kinder to practice the shoulder retraction. Be sure and follow my social media channels to get all these tips on using pool noodles in your land yoga practice. Thanks so much for practicing with me today. Namaste. Hi, I'm Krista Fairbrother of Be Content Yoga. Thanks for joining me on my series of how to use pool noodles in your land yoga practice. You might be a person living with carpal tunnel syndrome or arthritis in your wrists and have trouble getting on all fours or bearing weight in your hand in your land yoga practice. A traditional yoga wedge can be great for this, but they're kind of expensive. They cost about $25, so you may not have access to one, or if you're a yoga teacher, it can be hard to afford enough for a whole class. So you can take a pool noodle, which costs you $1 at the dollar store, slit it in half vertically, cut it in half the other way, and you've got 4 wedges that you can then use to add a little space under your wrists when you practice. Take some pain out of your life. That's the most important thing. Thanks for joining me today. Be sure and subscribe to all my social media channels to get all the tips on using pool noodles in your land practice. Namaste. Hi, I'm Krista Fairbrother. Thanks for joining me on my series on using pool noodles in your land yoga practice. If you're a person living with arthritis in the saddle joint of your thumb, it can be hard to practice in a weight-bearing situation. A yoga wedge still asks you to put the flat of your hand down on the ground and doesn't necessarily help with that weight-bearing feature. If you go to the dollar store, get yourself a pool noodle, cut it like 1 inch off, it can be put under your hand, so now you've got a little bit of space, allowing that joint to not bear weight again, similar to if your hands were in cupcake position, but this takes a lot of finger strength and also might still be jamming your thumb. So this can be a super cheap, handy alternative to keep you practicing. Be sure and subscribe to all my social media channels to get all my tips on using pool noodles in your land yoga practice. Thanks so much. Namaste. Hi, I'm Krista Fairbrother of Be Content Yoga. Thanks for joining me today on my series on using pool noodles in your land yoga practice. Traditional land yoga doesn't have a lot of grasping activities that help us build strength in our forearms or help us work with arthritis in our hands if we live with that. As a yoga teacher, I like to teach hand activities, but I see a lot of articulation of single joints in our hand instead of asking everything to move. So asking people to wrap their hands around a pool noodle asks every joint in my hand to articulate and helps me build strength in my forearm. Be sure and subscribe to my social media channels to get all these tips on using pool noodles in your land yoga practice. Thanks for joining me today. Namaste.